Dr. Best is an assistant professor at UW Milwaukee's College of Health Sciences. He received his master's in industrial engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and his PhD in operations management at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business with a research focus on hospital operations. He is currently teaching a variety of courses here at UW Milwaukee and will share with us today his use of low-stakes quizzes to boost student learning. So welcome, Dr. Best.
Thanks, Lane. Thanks very much for your help in getting ready for today, and thanks everybody on a kind of overcast Wednesday morning for being here. And I'm excited to talk to you today about my experiences, early experiences in formative assessment here with some quizzes in Canvas. So, without further ado, how many have heard of UPACE before? About half? Okay. All right. Well, UPACE is something developed at UW Milwaukee, actually by someone in the room and colleagues, Diane colleagues. That is a mastery-based learning, I'm going to say tool, but it's really a concept and a structure that couples with amplified assistance and is meant to be done in an online setting. And I'm by no means an expert on UPACE, but I started here back in August of 2018, and I was getting ready to teach a course, and I was looking online for the types of material that UWM has available for instructors to help, and I came across UPACE, and I was so excited by it, and I made it kind of a goal eventually to build up towards a UPACE type course. And in my first semester, I didn't do anything related to UPACE, but in this semester, I'm currently teaching an online course in my area of training and expertise. I'm going to be kind of vague about the course because it's a small course. I'm actually going to show some of my quiz performance from the course and de-identified, but de-identified it seems simple, but it's not. So, I'm going to try to preserve that de-identification as much as possible. But anyway, it's a course in my area of training and expertise. And when I was starting to design the course, I realized it was going to be entirely online. And when a course, and I wanted to administer exams, or I call them exams in the course, but in Canvas nomenclature, I'm using the quizzes modules. I wanted to use quizzes because I knew when I was a student, I tried to think what I prepared the most for. And that word exam or quizzes is a very loaded word, regardless of how much weight is put on a quiz or an exam. We all prepared for it a great deal. And rightly so. In many cases, a quiz or exam suggests that you're going to be kind of put on the spot, so to speak. You're going to have some sort of maybe time limit on how long it takes you to answer some questions. And perhaps they're questions you haven't seen before or haven't really got a chance to fully prepare for that specific question. So I knew I wanted to administer something related to a quiz in this online course. But I also knew that it was online. And the first reasons I really started to design the courses, which I'll describe, the quizzes, which I'll describe, was in the interest of fairness. And I recognized that if I were to say, I had just come off a semester, last fall, I did a semester, my course design was much more traditional. There were in-class exams, closed note, closed book. I gave them a study guide ahead of time that was very detailed and actually gave away a lot of the questions if they put in some effort. And but I knew I really couldn't do that so reliably in an online setting. So I wanted to kind of do an open note, open book, even open web exam, but I also wanted to be fair to those who had put in the time ahead of time to learn. And I wanted to encourage everyone to get the most out of their learning experience. So folks who say get a lot of pressure from taking an exam and they don't perform as well under that pressure, I wanted to alleviate some of that pressure, but still have a little bit to ensure that investment, engagement, and time. A lot of my other reasoning, I think, for creating these quizzes, as I'll describe, will come forth as I'm presenting, hopefully, the material. But those were some of my reasons for where I started. And then, so I looked around online And I remembered, oh yeah, the UPACE framework. One of the core elements of the UPACE framework is quizzes that students could take multiple times. They could take them as many times as they wanted, I believe, in some of the UPACE design. And they had shown that for some students, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that some of the students that initially did not perform so well in the material, they had shown through a well-designed study that those students improved their learning and their mastery of the material through this structure. And I felt that the elements of, as we all do, the elements of my course were so critical to their futures that I wanted everyone to get a chance to learn as much as they could from the material. So UPACE kind of came in and saved the day. So today I'm going to review some of my quiz design. Very briefly, I'm going to try to go into Canvas and show you how I graded these quizzes, because there's a little bit of a trick to it, or a little bit of complexity to it. Not too much though. And then I'll review some of the data on it's a very small class, as I mentioned, and I have 4 quizzes in that class, so there's very little data, but I have seen some data that indicates to me that things seem to be helping their learning. And there's not much I can say really with little data. I do a lot of statistical research, but I'm not going to try to convey small sample results as confirmative. And then I'll talk a little bit about my lessons learned and future improvements to this design. So this is a lot of text on this slide, but it gives you the nitty-gritty of how my quizzes are designed. So there's 4 quizzes. They're about 3 to 5 chapters in a book each. The book is very much required for the course. I communicate that through the syllabus and early on in the course, in the time frame, because a lot of the questions are based directly on material in the book, and slides that I use. I am supported by with material from the publisher of the book. So there's a lot of reliance on the textbook. They're worth 10% of their final grade, so 40% total for all these quizzes. But each quiz in itself is actually only 3 times as much as the discussion question submission, one of their other assignments. I make it completely open notes, book, and web. I do ask that they keep it, that it's an individual assignment. But I do not have a way of monitoring that right now, or a way that I implement in this course, a systematic way. Now for each quiz, I limit it to attempting only 3 times, and I make the time frame in which they can take the quiz 48 hours. The reason I wanted to limit, there were 2 reasons. One was practical, and one was, I think, pedagogical. The practical one is I have some short answer questions built into the exam, and to grade an infinite amount of short answers wasn't feasible, even though no one would take it infinite many times, but there would be many, conceivably, possibly many short answers. Also, I didn't necessarily want to make it so that a student who, when I was talking with Lane about it, I talked about how I related this to in a working environment, at least the working environments I've experienced. Oftentimes you have a limited amount of time to prepare a deliverable, and I didn't want to enable someone to, as long as they took it, and if they devoted their entire life that weekend to that exam, that they would get an A. I wanted to kind of incentivize preparation a little bit, and internalization of the material, not just rote memorization or being able to check back on previous responses. I'm thinking about other ways to change this in the future, but anyway, 1 hour duration for each attempt. One of the key elements is that each attempt is 30 questions, but they're drawn from a bank of in my case, about twice as many questions. In the UPACE framework, they actually drew them from a much larger bank. I create many of these questions, so 1/3 of these questions are completely designed from scratch by me. 2/3 of them, I start with a template from the course publisher, and I then review those questions and be sure that I agree with the answers, which in some cases I don't. and also that the questions are clear. And then I keep it about 60. Some chapters have more default questions or more questions that I can draw from the publisher, but I don't want to change I don't want to change the size of the bank from exam to exam that much. So I keep it around 60 questions. I think the most I had was 64. It's a mix of multiple choice, true, false, and short answer. All of the publisher's questions happen to be multiple choice and true, false. For mine, I make about half of mine short answer. So that's 10, I make a size of 20 questions for the, yeah, that's right. 20 questions for the 1/3 that I designed, and 10 of them are short answer. So any particular take, you're likely to get about 5 short answer questions to answer. And I should mention another motivation. I wanted to be able to make challenging quiz questions, but I thought, in my world was challenging, and some students blow me away. I mean, they get it right the first time easily, it seems. But I wanted to really have those questions as part of my quiz, so that even a student who had really prepared would see a quiz question. Sometimes in my previous class, when they take a quiz, they didn't necessarily have as many challenging questions, because they had one chance, and it was 60 minutes, and it was pressure, a lot of pressure. But in especially with short answer, I wanted to give them a chance to really dive in, really get some deep knowledge. So that's a digression, but that's kind of my thought process with the short answer questions as well. And I mentioned the test banks available through the publisher. Also, in Canvas, there's so many settings you can, and Lane will show them, but one of them is how many times you can allow someone to view a quiz after it's completed. I know that in the past as a student, there was a tendency sometimes of students to keep material from exams from bygone eras, and even if they were in friendship with another student who was a year earlier in the program, to pass that information on, and these large banks of material get built. And I didn't want to encourage route memorization. I wanted to encourage individual learning from no knowledge. So I can't necessarily prevent someone, to be frank, I can't prevent someone from taking a screenshot when they see their exam at the end, or from copying the text and putting it into another file. I can't do that. I don't show them the correct answer. You can prevent that in Canvas. I show them which questions they got wrong. And I show them that only once. There's a lot of flexibility here in design. That's the best part to me. Okay, so I am going to dive into Canvas just really quickly to show you how the grading goes for short answers, at least give you some sense of it. So let's open it up. So here is the test student for my exam 4, quiz 4, which just happened this last weekend. And I filled out the exam as a test student. One thing I want to point out here is this log. If you open up that log, you can actually see that there's a timestamp for every time they make any change to their answer on every question. So imagine the data and imagine the implications of that data. I haven't used it much. I looked at it for a couple folks, but just to see a sense of the structure of it. Every time you open up a quiz in the Spree grader, you'll see these are the following questions that need review. So it automatically grades, of course, multiple choice and true false. One thing, as many of you probably know, when you're designing a quiz in Canvas, you can add, and this kind of gets to that amplified assistance, but not really. It's an automated response, right? Not as endearing in many things. But this is a response I wrote. If you click 40 days here, the true answer to the question is, which they don't see when I see this as the instructor, is that there's not enough information for this question. It's rather a tricky question, actually. So I thought, if someone picks 40 days, which is frankly what I would have picked when I first looked at this quickly, it I realize that there's not enough information here because of details that are irrelevant, but so I added a comment here. So if they pick 40, they get that comment right away when they view it after they're done taking the exam. Also, so now down at the bottom, before they take the quiz, I tell them the short answer questions are going to be in the last 10 that you take, that you get 3 attempts, that you only see the exam once when you're done with the exam the first time. You have 48 hours, and please contact me if you have any questions. I also say, if you have questions on one of the questions, do contact me, but I can't. So the class is all online, and some of my students work full time. So I actually have all of their quizzes. They take them over the weekend. They start at 12 midnight on Saturday, and then they're due at 11:59 on Sunday. And I personally, I don't commit to responding in that weekend to their questions, but I actually haven't gotten any questions over the weekend on my quiz questions, which is actually surprising, at least for me. So anyway, you scroll down to the bottom, and you see in the last 10 questions, there's some multiple choice that I designed, and then there's some, and these questions are long, right? This is a lot of text for just the question. But I'll show you, actually I don't show the duration of how long it took to take exams, but I can see that, and many students are taking a half hour only out of the 60 minutes to take the exam. And my scores they're not all in the 90s. So maybe that's still indicative that I should make an even more challenging exam, anyway, they seem to have enough time to read the question. And then I'll always say in my questions, this is not formative assessment necessarily related, but I will describe, I believe I say on this one, no, I don't give a word limit on, using 40 words or less in total. I try to give them a target for their short answers. And then, so what I'll do is I will go in and, it didn't save that. Interesting. Okay. So earlier this morning, I went in, I filled in responses in additional comments, and I didn't click update scores on the bottom. So when I went back in now, it's not here. I've never not done that up till this point, but now we know, right? So what I do though to grade, as we all know, many times, if there's an example of a correct answer and you want to share that, you can write that up. And then you can just copy paste that example of the correct answer. Now, you can also give customized feedback to what was wrong about their answer. So what I'll do is I'll give maybe a sentence about that. And then I will paste in my example of what I consider to be an answer that would get full points. In addition to, now remember, I only have,
Do you have the option of having that like canned feedback popping up with the short answer questions, or is that only for auto grade?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
I think so. I think I remember seeing that, but I'm not sure about
Like
that.
if you assign a score of 0, if you could automatically have that pop up as feedback to the student.
I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
Lane apparently knows.
No, there's no option to do that for outside of rubrics. Rubrics gives you a little more flexibility for that sort of thing, but you can give right answer, wrong answer, and the general comments for question answers, but it's not tied to grades, which is a great idea that we could put into the Canvas community to suggest.
That would save even more time with this, and it would be kind of more immediate feedback. So encouraging the formative learning process. So anything else I want to say about grading? Yes. So if I think about the math of it, if I'm really, I only have 13 students in the class. So many times I'm able to say they have 3 attempts. In theory, if they got a 20, not in theory, in truth, if they got a 25 out of 30 on their 3rd attempt, and their first 2 attempts, let's say, were zeros, only 2 of the question, at max, 2 of the 10 of the questions are short answer. So if I'm pressed for time and I want to ensure they have the correct final grade, final score, and I don't have time to grade all attempts, I don't need to grade all attempts in that case, because they got zeros on their first 2. And even if they got all 10 of the last ones correct, they still would only get a 10 out of 30. Now, fortunately, in my sake, I only had 13 students. So I think there were less than 10 of the total attempts did I not grade the previous. It doesn't happen very often that their score is so low on the initial attempt where you don't have to grade it to ensure that they didn't get a better score on one of their first attempts than on their last attempt. And second, I only have 13 students. So many times I'd go back and I'd see that they started to develop the right answer on their short answer, but they ran out of time, or they didn't get the full concept. And so on a later attempt, they actually do a little bit better because they randomly got that question the same again. So anyway, that's something to keep in mind when thinking about the practicality of designing these quizzes with multiple attempts with short answers. The last thing I want to mention thanks. The last thing I want to mention is a technicality on Canvas that is frustrating. When you open up the attempt to grade it, at least, and hold on, there we go. So if I want to go back to another attempt, there's not a long lag right now. I've experienced lags on my end going back, and I mean, there's only 13 students in the class, but I've seen, it's not a huge lag, maybe 10 seconds.
You're using
This all goes back to Microsoft. So when I go back, and maybe it's an Edge issue, I use Microsoft Edge browser. Don't ask me why. I'm going to switch back to Chrome. So when I go back to a previous attempt, I have had it in Edge not work correctly, so it won't load. It won't load at all. The lag seems to be infinite. I'll wait a minute and nothing will happen. So I'll have to go up to the refresh button up here. And then when it refreshes, it will go back to the latest attempt. And then if I go back to a previous attempt, it will work. And that's not, I've tried this over a dozen times and consistently that is the fix. So, okay. Back to the presentation. All right, so here are some performance stats real briefly on the quiz. The summary of this is people are taking it more than once, but they're not taking it all, they're not all taking it 3 times. The average I think the median is also 2 if you look at all the quizzes. But there are so this quiz was right before spring break, and actually it wasn't that hard of a quiz. So it makes 2 things combined, many of them just took it once. This quiz had the lowest average score. But anyway, even from the beginning, most of the students, the majority of the students took it more than once. Overall, that's also true. All right, so then I wanted to just another stat about attempts. I want to look at how long are they spending time between attempts. And this is between start times. So I give them 60 minutes to take the quiz, and the median time between is just over 60 minutes. So many folks are taking it back to back. But there are some folks, the average is 4 hours. So this doesn't show that 8 time lapses that people, 7 hours, 11 hours, even more that people between takes. And they have 48 hours to take it. And another thing, you can download detailed stats from the quiz statistics tab in Canvas per student. But interestingly, the time, at least maybe it's my settings on my machine again, probably Edge, it was 6 hours ahead of what it actually was. I just noticed that this morning. I want to know when they're taking the exam. Are they taking it Saturday morning or Sunday? Anyway, it was 6 hours ahead systematically. So message from this is they seem to be taking it mostly back to back, but some folks are taking it with longer time in between. Scores, remember I'm allowing them 3 attempts. Every question has a 50% chance of showing up exactly the same on the next quiz. Actually, that's not entirely true. On the 4th quiz, I randomized the order of the answers. You have to be careful with that if there's an all of the above, right? But you can go in and change it to all of these answers or something like that. So anyway, I got averages for Bs. There was some variance in their scores. These were final scores. Some folks did really, really well, and some folks still are hopefully learning the material. Now, about scores versus attempts. Remember, this is a very small sample, and there's a lot of endogeneity here. You're not necessarily certain that someone who takes it multiple times is not just taking it multiple times because they didn't do well the first time. That doesn't mean they're necessarily a low-performing, student, because they just might have done poorly on their first attempt for whatever reason. But students who take it once actually have they tend to do the best overall. Slightly, this is probably not even statistically significant, especially if I controlled for other things. But the message here is, as they take it more, they're getting substantially large improvements in their scores. But, relative to the first take, for those who took it 3 times, they got a 15% improvement. They went from by some records, a failing grade to a B on average.
Just for clarification, do you keep the highest score?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I only keep the highest score. Yep.
Not averaging them together or anything
Correct.
like that?
Yep. So lessons I've learned: allowing multiple attempts seems to be a manageable component to formative assessment. Custom questions with short answers take time to grade and create, but I really think they do foster learning. As I mentioned, I saw evidence, at least on a student-by-student basis, of taking it the first time, not quite getting the answer, but then actually having the full answer when they were done, a correct one. I don't have any student feedback yet on this design. I've asked, please email me if you have any comments on the exams. I might get some at, in the course evaluations. In the future, I want to add to and modify the question banks. Write more preloaded feedback, enabling some more of that adaptive assessment or amplified assistance that's in the UPACE structure, and perhaps allow more attempts and perhaps allow students to view the quiz afterwards more than once. So thank you very much.
Any questions for this? Yes.
I know you don't have student feedback yet, but I'm curious about the logistics of the short answer grading.
Yeah.
Right, so they don't know their score on those questions.
Right.
Do you have any idea if how they decide whether or not to do another attempt without that part of the grade?
So I have noticed some students will not put an answer at all for the short answer. They'll use their first attempt to see what the questions are, or try to see what some of the short answer questions are.
Yeah.
They don't even spend the time to fill out so that's observation. I don't know if that's directly answering or providing insight necessarily. I do notice that I do tell them ahead of time that they should take another attempt if they don't feel that they answered the question correctly. In the future, I think one of the improvements to this design would be to somehow semi-automate response to the short answers so that they get that feedback during the time in which they could take it again. That is one of the limitations. Yeah.
I was curious if you encourage them to take it multiple times. So
Yes.
Do you say, just take it one time, see how you do, and then if you want, you can retake it? Or do you say, I highly encourage you to take it 3 times to get different questions and to learn more? Like how do you
I haven't done it systematically the same way for every quiz. For this last quiz, I tried to make a quiz that was a little bit more challenging, and it was naturally more challenging. It covered more chapters and a summary chapter. So I said to them ahead of time, I encourage, remember, you get multiple attempts for this, encourage you to spend a little more time ahead of time preparing, and also to take I think I said, take it early Saturday morning the first time, to give yourself time to finish to study for those last couple attempts. like I said, something like that at the end. But I definitely encourage them to take it more than once.
I was late, you might have already said this. Is this 40% the only type of exam, quiz, assessment?
Yes, yeah, it's the only, there are other individual assignments.
Yeah.
Like there's an individual reflection paper at the end, and they have a project, and there's other team assignments too, like discussion questions from the book.
Have you seen improvement overall in the course, do you feel, or is this something you think you need to look at more?
I think I need to look at it more. I need to look at it more. Hypothetically, there are some students who I had some communication with early on, and who have, but I don't think this is formative assessment related, but they've done better over the course.
I think that'd be definitely a question to look at,
Yeah.
to see how that impacts that using the quiz multiple times to try to reinforce main points.
Yeah.
How that would impact their overall learning within that course would be something that's something
Yeah.
we need to look at.
I think I need a cumulative assessment of some kind. Sure. I don't have that right now, so it's, yeah.
Well, any other questions before we switch gears a little bit? All right, well, thank you.